All right, so today's second part of the notes on Chapter 6 is going to focus on kind of the emergence of political parties and the first party system in our country. So this is kind of going to be a little bit reviewish, also stuff you probably learned about in government last year. But we'll hit some of those main points and explain things out. Still planning on the quiz on Thursday, and then a packet also will be due on Thursday. So remember last time we kind of talked about the process of coming to and making the Constitution. So that's where we are. We've had these founding fathers. They've all come together. They've met. They've disbanded the Articles of Confederation. And even though they didn't mean to totally blow up the Articles, they've come up with this totally new system of government. And now it's made it through the states. And it's made it through the states, and it's ratified, and now we are the new government under the United States Constitution. Okay, so from there we're going to see the development of some political parties and ideologies, and so on and so forth. So we'll get right to it. So on one side you have the Federalists, or the Federalist Party. So let's kind of see what these people are all about. First of all, the Federalists. This picture right here is Alexander Hamilton, kind of the de facto leader of the Federalist Party, but it also includes folks like John Adams, John Jay, James Madison, but then he leaves and becomes a Democratic Republican because he wants to be more like Thomas Jefferson, but whatever. And kind of yes, kind of no, George Washington. George Washington never joined a political party, and that's an important point as well that we'll get into later. But he never officially became a Federalist either. So, and as a no-party guy, he was kind of this person in the middle who, would be a voice of reason, I guess you could say. So anyway, but in any event, when it comes to the Federalists or the Anti-Federalists, George Washington kind of supports the Federalist plan more. So that's kind of why he gets grouped with the Federalists a little bit. So what do the Federalists believe in? First of all, the Federalists support a strong national government. You can't even see that. We'll try this. Strong national government. So that's kind of the Federalist belief. Believe in a strong national government. People like to draw comparisons between the Federalists and the Anti-Federalists and who would be who today. Who would be the Republicans and who would be the Democrats. It's a very different country back then. So really neither. If you look closely, as we will here shortly, at the ideals between the two parties, each one has some very Democratic and ideals, and each one has some very Republican ideals. So they don't really fit as one or the other, as some people think. But anyway, so the Federalist Party believe, for one, in a strong national government. Okay, that's very important to their system. That's very important to their belief. They believe that the government is stronger when it's led by intelligent people. They believe that enlightened people, as they call it, should be the ones that are in charge. So educated, more urban people, kind of we're talking about more people from cities. One distinction with the Federalists is they tend to be more from the coast and tend to be more from like cities like Boston or New York or Philadelphia, places like that is where a lot of the Federalists tend to come from. Okay. Another thing the Federalists believe in is a strong national bank. Alexander Hamilton is the father of the American banking system and was first Secretary of the Treasury, and he's a believer in a strong national bank. In other words, what we call it today isn't the national bank. We call it the Federal Reserve or the Treasury Department. But the national bank used to be what controlled money in the United States at first. And Hamilton's able to get a charter for what's called the First Bank of the U.S., which is a 20-year charter from like 1891 or 1791 to 1811. And he believes that a national bank is going to help stabilize the country economically. The national bank can manage debt. So can it manage national debts? And we have debts, privately owned ones, to individuals as well as ones owned to other countries. One thing to understand about Hamilton, Alexander Hamilton believed a little bit of debt was a good thing. A little bit of debt keeps money flowing through your economic system, keeps people funding things, keeps people investing. So debt, a little bit of debt is a good thing. I don't think he ever envisioned a $22 trillion debt, which is, of course, where our country is now. But he believed that a little bit of a debt was actually a good thing. So it's good for the economy. The national bank is good for the economy, and it's going to allow kind of the nation to regulate, the government to regulate money and commerce and things, and going to give them more power in that regard. So Alexander Hamilton is your big supporter of the national bank. Again, like I said, Hamilton believed that a little bit of debt is a good thing. Okay, if a government can continue to manage and pay a national debt, it's going to keep money flowing again through the economy and that sort of thing. That's an important point to remember, because I know that you think, oh, a debt is never a good thing, but a little bit of debt is. Like, we always talk about the national debt in the United States and how it's like $22 trillion, and that's really bad, don't get me wrong. But if we had like zero debt, if we had like zero national debt, that means there would be probably very little money flowing through our economic system, which would mean our economy isn't necessarily doing all that well. Okay, so that's just something to keep in mind there. The national government under the Federalists, their taxation plan includes essentially, and let's see where we can find some room here. So we go there. The big tax is on liquor, so big tax on liquor. So a big liquor tax, and then a big a tariff on imports. So that is how basically So that is how the government is going to raise money, through an import tariff and taxes on liquor. So that's going to be the big kind of source of income. A government needs income, so income is very important. And that's essentially going to help us build a stronger economic base. Okay? Does that make sense? Hopefully. And then we want to build a strong economic base. We have a simple taxation plan, liquor taxes, taxing imported goods, encouraging people to buy American goods, etc. So it's a good, well-rounded, organized system here. Okay. At the end of the day, who does this system help and who does it not help? And it's important to note kind of who is for who and who is kind of against who. So basically, who is helped here are basically wealthier people, businessmen, people who we would refer to as kind of like coastal elites. Businessmen in the coasts and cities that kind of manage trade and things like that. Wealthier people in cities benefit most from the Federalist plan. Like I said before, Federalists tend to be from like cities and more concentrated areas. Who is hurt a little bit by their plan is farmers, right? An import tariff is bad for farmers. Liquor taxes actually are bad for farmers too. In particular, the imports, because if we put a tariff on imports, it's probably countries are going to respond with a tariff on imports to their countries too, which means it costs the farmer more. So you kind of see this situation occur. But in total, it's a good program because America as a whole benefits through economic growth. And even though it's good for the wealthy people, not as good for your farmers, however. Okay. The opposition party are the Anti-Federalists. So this is really, it's kind of confusing. I put the term Democratic Republicans up here because that's what they're going to become known as. So the Anti-Federalists were first known as the Anti-Federalists. And then somewhere along the line, and they're led by Thomas Jefferson, and somewhere along the line they changed their name to the Jeffersonian Republicans. The Jeffersonian Republicans. However, these are not at all like the Republicans of today. This is not the same party. In fact, this party eventually disappears, so it is not the same Republican Party. So that's where we get confused. So instead, political scientists and historians have renamed this party kind of to avoid confusion, the Democratic Republicans. Okay, and they never called themselves this. The Jeffersonian people from this era never referred to their party as the Democratic Republicans. But historically, we call them that because people would get too confused by the Jeffersonian Republicans and people saying that Jefferson then would probably have been a Republican. Actually, he probably wouldn't have. Maybe a bit more of a Democrat, but again, very different country 200 years ago. So anyway, so what do they come from? What are they about? So it is the Republican opposition, okay, again, the same as the Anti-Federalists, the Republican opposition to Federalist plans. The negative of this is, remember Federalist 10, where James Madison warned us against political parties and factions? Well, we're already in the process, really quickly here, of developing political parties, where even though we warned against this, all of a sudden we've got political parties here. And the general opposition, especially in the purpose of the Republicans here, is the belief that political parties are bad. Because at the end of the day, parties don't keep the best interests of people in mind. They become too concerned with getting reelected. They become too concerned with themselves to make actually the sound, necessary decisions that are going to best help a country, right? So, that's where we are. As soon as the country's formed, we're already creating political opposition. So this is the opposition to Federalists. So what is it that they don't like about the program that Alexander Hamilton proposed? Okay, basically, they want to support a plan that focuses more on agricultural growth. Okay, they feel that Hamilton's plan, and it's probably true, is not very good for farmers. So, not good for farmers. The Democratic Republicans or the Anti-Federalists are the party of the farmer. So they support a plan that focuses on agricultural growth. In other words, at that time, these are the average, everyday, common man, everyday people in America. So we're focusing on the common man, the everyday people. The Federalist plan only focuses on the elites. This is their argument. They want to support a plan to keep the best interests of those people in mind. And that's the whole reason that Jefferson here kind of starts the Republican Party, or the Anti-Federalist, or the Democratic Republicans, whatever you want to call them, because they need to form to create opposition to keep the Federalist Party in check. Otherwise, the Federalists run away with the country, is their view. So that is their kind of position with that. They're also not big fans of the National Bank. Okay, they feel that the National Bank really only represents the interests of wealthy people in the cities. Okay, frankly, and there's probably some truth to that, because in the cities is where people are going to have their most access to the National Bank, access to money, access to banks and places where you can get money. The more rural you get out, the more away from high population concentrations you go, the fewer people you're going to be able to find, and the more problems that, accessibility to money or lack thereof are going to cause. So, for good reason, the Jeffersonians here, or the Republicans, or the Democratic Republicans, or the Anti-Federalists, generally opposed to the national bank. We also have the issue of strict versus loose interpretation of the Constitution. The Jeffersonians believe in a strict interpretation of the Constitution. In other words, what it says is exactly how it should play out. The word should be there, and it should be followed to the word, okay? Versus the Federalists, who believe in more of a loose interpretation of the Constitution. It's not meant to be taken literally. They're meant to be kind of ideas, general principles to kind of oversee processes for the country. So there's a general disagreement between the two sides on this too. The Jefferson folks believe in a strict interpretation of the Constitution. The Hamiltonians or the Federalists believe in more of a loose interpretation of the Constitution. In fact, we'll break it more down a little bit here. So looking at this, so you see the beliefs of the Federalist Party. They believe that the best people should rule. In other words, and not that somebody is better than somebody else, but the most educated are the most skilled and are the people that should make the decisions. Okay, experienced folks. They don't want to see democracy extended too far because people could take advantage of it. They believe in a powerful central government at the expense of states' rights. That's a big area of disagreement between the two sides. Again, loose interpretation of the Constitution. The government needs to, strengthen business and capital enterprise to better the country. They believe in a tariff. They're actually more pro-British. They know that you need to have a good relationship with the British to build your economic base. So they actually like that. They like a national debt, like I said before. If it's funded well, if you manage to fund the debt in a good way, which we don't do now, then a debt is fine. Bureaucracy, a powerful central bank. They believe that there should be some restrictions on free speech and press. And again, they tend to be near the coasts. Okay, the Jeffersonians believe in rule by the masses, rule by everybody. They want to extend democracy to people. They believe in a weaker central government. Again, more states' rights focused. The Constitution should be interpreted strictly. No special treatment for business. They like agriculture more. No special favors to that. They tend to be more pro-French. Jefferson loved the French for some reason. He's kind of dumb. Get rid of national debt. National debts are a bad thing. Smaller government, not a lot of big office holders and anything like that, which is a big difference from here. Supporting more state banks. Again, states' rights, state banks would make sense. Free speech, we see that play out in the First Amendment of the Constitution. These folks tend to be in the slave areas, South and Southwest, in the backcountry. And they're not big on military, actually. They don't want to maintain a military. They're more militia-type people, grab military when you need them. So that is where they stand with that. All right, so what we now have is the creation of the first party system, which Madison warned us against, which we don't think is a great idea, but we end up with it anyway. So essentially, the two parties emerge because they both believe in different things. The Federalists want to represent, economic growth at the expense of who they consider to be non-elites. Okay, while the Jeffersonian folks say they represent the common man. So we still have like a general group. Coastal city people are Federalists. People in the, people that are in the back country areas and farmers, they are the Republicans. So again, we've kind of got the different parties, and they're also geographically separated as well. Okay. Um, now, I said before we talk about George Washington as president. George Washington is the first and greatest president we've ever had for a lot of reasons. He was an incredible leader. He just, had a presence about him that you don't see in a lot of people. And George Washington was always a voice of reason. Okay, he knew what he knew about, but was willing to defer in other areas. For instance, he knew he didn't know as much about, economics and banking and stuff as Alexander Hamilton. So he deferred to Alexander Hamilton and surrounded himself with the right people to handle certain responsibilities to strengthen the country as a whole. And that's really important for the growth and future of this country. Right? Second, George Washington sets the precedent, and this is the most important thing. George Washington could have been president for life. Okay. In fact, when he was named, it wasn't an election. He was named the first president of the United States. John Adams, of all people, suggested that his title actually be His Majesty the President. And instead, George Washington said, no, that sounds too much like the British, what we fought to get away from. I don't want that title. It'll just be the President. Okay. And that's kind of a big deal, right? What makes George Washington great and an example for all future presidents is he showed restraint. He could have made the presidency whatever he wanted it to be. He could become a dictator, could become a monarch, could have become a tyrant. But he said, I'm going to be the first one, and I'm going to make it like this. And he established a precedent. Make sure you write this down and understand it. Washington established a precedent for all future presidents to follow. He serves one term, he gets reelected, he serves a second term, and could have stayed in, would have won again, but said, you know what, I think that's enough. And every other president that has followed since then, with the exception of Franklin Roosevelt, followed that precedent. Said 2 terms, and that's it. Because that's what they call the George Washington precedent. Because he was so well respected and such an incredible leader for this country at the right time, that I think, that's why I think of him as maybe the greatest president we've had, right? He's a man of character and a man of honor, that when he was given power in his face, all that you want, he shows this incredible restraint, and he sets up the country for a positive future. And I think there's a lot to be said for that. So, finally today, what we're talking about is kind of what are the regional and economic differences that we see in the United States. And as I said before, you've got the 2 parties. You've got the Federalists, who tend to be in the New England area, in the cities, and the Democratic Republicans, who tend to be in the rural areas in the South. So we're seeing the regional differences form. And hopefully you notice also that, the Federalists are kind of in the non-slave areas, and the Republicans, the Democratic Republicans, are in the slave areas. Okay? So we're seeing kind of that regional difference emerge. We're pro-slavery. We're against slavery in the North. Economically, we're going to see more of a manufacturing base emerge in the North. In industry, while in the South are going to become more dependent on agricultural goods, and that's going to drive this wedge. It's going to grow and grow and grow between the country. That in the long term is going to be another thing that's going to lead us in the path to civil war. Okay, and that's kind of the downside of that. But that's unfortunately kind of the way things play out. So. Early on, it's the 1790s, and we're already kind of seeing that division emerge that's going to lead us towards civil war. So that's all for today.